Well, tonight on the Big Story Breakdown, this day, 7th of July, 2026, the Nigerian Senate moved from rhetoric to a resolution with teeth. Renewed violence against Nigerians in South Africa has now forced lawmakers into action. Now, this breakdown tonight examines what the new motion actually does, what it deliberately holds back, and what happens once the committee's clock runs out. Here it is. Fractured ties. Senate is drawing a line. The headline number is actually 4. That's the number of Nigerians who have been killed in South Africa between April and June of this year. The human cost behind this motion. Now, alongside it, 1,094 Nigerians have now registered for voluntary repatriation. And this is a sharp jump that signals just how unsafe citizens now feel. Well, the Nigerian Senate has answered with a 2-week deadline. The window its own Committee on Foreign Affairs now has to report back with findings. Recurring violence is now testing decades of relations, interdependence, and African solidarity between Nigeria and South Africa. Now, let's talk about the Senate motion. It was adopted today, July the 7th, and it was sponsored by Senator Asuko Ekpenyong, condemning renewed attacks on Nigerian citizens and businesses in South Africa. It actually orders the committee its Committee on Foreign Affairs now to report back within 2 weeks, and it does revisit an earlier resolution from the 5th of May, which is now overtaken by fresh escalation. And the immediate trigger that has been cited is a 30th of June ultimatum that was issued to foreigners alongside the fresh killings that followed it in South Africa. Now, crucially, the harshest options on the table will be severing ties or nationalizing South African businesses. These are some motions that were tabled but not adopted today on the floor of the Red Chamber. Now, let's look at the mutually assured economic exposure. What really is this bilateral with? This is a relationship of mutually assured economic exposure between 500,000 and 800,000 Nigerians actually live in South Africa, and many are dependent on informal retail and service work, while Nigeria remains a major exporter of oil to the South African market. On the other side, roughly 120 South African companies operate in Nigeria, and they're deriving major revenue and profits here, relying on consumers for revenue dividends, while South Africa exports finished goods and services back into Nigeria. Now, retaliatory rhetoric puts massive investments and thousands of jobs at risk on both sides, whichever way you look at it. And let's talk about this action plan being proposed by the Nigerian Senate. It's in 3 phases. Now, phase 1 is investigation. That's the fresh probe by the Committee on Foreign Affairs, bound by that strict 2-week deadline. That's what they have. And phase 2 is review, reassessing prior resolutions, and that was citing the 5th of May resolution, alongside a comprehensive look at bilateral agreements. And phase 3 actually talks about the consequences, which is the looming threat of economic diplomacy and potential sanctions on South African firms, although proposals to sever ties or nationalize businesses remain deferred pending the probe by the Senate Committee on Foreign Affairs. How do we prevent a diplomatic collapse? The 2 paths are now sitting ahead of this relationship. Constructive diplomacy on one hand, that is built around a joint parliamentary fact-finding visit, data-driven migration reforms, and legal accountability for vigilante groups. Or second, escalation, fed by retaliatory rhetoric and business sabotage, shadowed by the historical weight of Nigeria's support over the years for South Africa's anti-apartheid struggle. Now, which path this takes would depend largely on what the Senate committee reports back in just 2 weeks. That's about 14 days. A line really has now been drawn, and now comes the follow-through. The Senate has named the pattern and set a clock on it. Whether this becomes real protection for Nigerians who are in South Africa or another resolution shelved once the headlines move on will depend on what happens